Okay, in this video, I'm going to be talking about a lot of important things. I'm going to be talking about supernatural bodies again, like supernatural people. And I'm going to be talking about how that ties into the frankincense and myrrh, alright? And I'm going to talk about how this relates to dragons and Jesus. Okay, it gets kind of involved, but I'll try my best to explain it, okay? So, I think how I'm going to start off this video is, how did Jesus die? What was the logical reason why Jesus died? He was crucified. And you know, you can watch many videos about how he was crucified and how you suffocate and how horrible it is. Yeah, I know. That is the logical human way that he died, but what I'm going to try to explain to you is him drinking that bitter wine is the reason he died. Okay? Alright? Which of course had to happen. The supernatural reason why he died was because he drank that wine, and I'm going to explain that in a minute. I'm going to have to get into the myrrh, okay? It's about myrrh, alright? Okay, so let's go back to the very beginning. A good place to start. We're going to go back to the beginning of the biblical history, and then we're going to go back to the beginning of ancient history, okay? Textbook version. Alright, so, what were Adam and Eve before they ate the fruit, before they fell? What were they? Were they human? Yeah, they were human, but they weren't normal, probably. They would, from our perspective now, we would call them supernaturally human, right? They were probably immortal, or maybe even semi-immortal. They were not the same as we are now, right? They were totally different, right? They were probably more close to being angelic than human now, right? Before they ate the fruit, all right? And I'm going to explain to you that God uses the myths behind all this stuff. And it doesn't matter because it just links it to Jesus anyway. Okay. Alright, so the reason why Adam and Eve fell, what killed them? What killed them? It's probably the myrrh. Okay. I'm going to explain to you how this was probably myrrh that was given to them. Okay. God uses the ancient mysteries behind myrrh to explain all this stuff, okay? So, I've been reading up on myrrh, frankincense and myrrh from many different cultures, and it kind of goes all over the place. Myrrh is actually very dangerous. It can be poisonous to humans if it's made very potently. It can be turned into wine. It can be turned into perfume. I've already been talking about how dangerous myrrh actually is. Do not. It's not too dangerous to burn a little bit of it, okay? But myrrh is actually very poisonous. These silly witch doctors or whatever they were doing, giving myrrh to people, saying it was healing, they were stupid, okay? Myrrh it's actually the exact opposite. It's very dangerous. It's bad for your skin. It's not for healing at all, all right? Anyway, this is very interesting. So we're going to talk about the myrrh, and we're going to talk about supernatural people and myrrh, okay? What I'm going to do is I'm going to explain to you, according to what I'm understanding, myrrh dismantles and kills and unplugs supernatural energy. And it can kill supernatural people. It's harmful to humans, but from what I understand, it's very dangerous to supernatural people. Okay, that's why Adam and Eve died. They had some myrrh, okay? Or because myrrh, according to ancient mysteries, myrrh is what kills supernatural people. It's the only thing that can kill them or bring them down, okay? And I'm going to link that to Adam and Eve, obviously. And then I'm going to link that to maybe even Samson. Samson was told not to drink some strong drink, right? Noah drank some strong drink. We assume it's just regular wine. Noah he drank some strong drink and he fell asleep. I'm going to link that all to myrrh, okay? And then of course I'm gonna bring up I'm gonna go ahead and go outside of the Bible. I'm gonna bring up, that's maybe what killed Medusa. It may be what killed the Cyclops, okay? And it's what Hercules used to kill all the monsters. He used myrrh. Like, if you read the myths behind how these monsters died, they drank wine, or they had swords or weapons dipped in dragon's blood, but myrrh is nicknamed dragon's blood. Okay, that's the only way you can kill a supernatural monster, especially according to the Greeks and the Romans. Okay, all right, it's the only way to kill or even knock them out for a while. Okay, that's what I'm getting here. And of course, it's theoretically what killed Jesus, because God uses these ancient myths. He uses all of them. Okay, so yeah, that's what I'm getting from the frankincense and myrrh. Frankincense is for healing. It's the opposite of myrrh, which I'll get into later. Okay, so theoretically, according to the Greeks and the Romans especially, myrrh is the only thing that could kill a supernatural being, so that's why they gave him Jesus myrrh at the cross. Alright? Okay? I'm gonna get into that right now. Myrrh is so dangerous to supernatural beings, it's mentioned in the Bible. Okay? They can't touch it at all. It's possibly even what killed not Hercules, it's what killed Goliath, okay? Because they cannot even touch myrrh for a second. It'll kill them, or it'll unplug their energy. Alright? And the Bible refers to myrrh as many things. It'll refer to myrrh as wine, because myrrh can be turned into wine and perfume, but it also can be turned into stones of fire. That's what this is. This is myrrh. It looks like stones of fire. And it'll go. The stones of fire are mentioned all throughout the Bible and how dangerous it is because it's myrrh. Okay, it's probably what killed Jesus. If you use the supernatural myths as to how to kill a supernatural person, you need myrrh. It's like the kryptonite of the ancient world. All right, it's literally like kryptonite for Superman, but it's the kryptonite of the ancient world. All right, you will either lose your power or it'll kill you. Alright? Even if you go into the deeper etymology behind the Garden of Eden, it'll say there was stones of fire all over the place, on the ground. Alright? And it'll say that, and then later it'll say David picked up the stones of fire from the ground. If you go into the translation between with these stones he picked up, it'll start translating into stones of fire, okay? Which is probably a reference to myrrh. And David was allowed to touch it. And Goliath, if he was a supernatural being, he was, according to these myths, they can't even touch it. Okay? That's why in the Bible, the seraphims cannot touch the myrrh. Because it's talking about these burning coals, alright? If you read the Isaiah and the seraphims have to pick up the stones of fire with tongs. Okay? Because they can't touch it. It's useful in some ways. They use it, but the angels cannot touch myrrh because it'll either kill them or it'll dismantle their power. Here, I'm just going to read it real fast. Then one of the seraphs flew to me with a live coal in his hand. That's probably a myrrh stone, okay? Which he had taken with tongs from the altar. With it, he touched my mouth and said, "See, this has touched your lips. Your guilt is taken away from, and your sin atoned for." Okay, yeah, you used frankincense and myrrh to anoint people. You could say his mouth was being anointed because he was about to become a prophet. Okay, a prophet of death, though, because myrrh represents death. Okay, because you have to say bad things when you prophesy, right? All right, but notice that the angel, the seraphim, cannot touch it. That's why he's using tongs. Okay, because according to the ancient myths behind myrrh, you cannot touch. Supernatural beings can't touch it, or they'll either lose their power or die. Okay. That's why in the Bible the seraphims can't touch it. They have to use tongs. Okay. Humans, it's not as bad as to humans, but for it's literally bad for supernatural beings. Okay. It'll either knock them out, unplug them, or even kill them. And God really uses that with Jesus. I get that now. There's no way that that's a coincidence. God uses it, man. It's possible that they were using myrrh for exorcisms, especially with the Greeks and the Romans. Okay, it scared away evil spirits. It's probably what killed Medusa and the Cyclops. Okay, that's how they were thinking about it. If you don't believe me, you can go read Herodotus if you would like. He'll go into it. It gets really weird. Okay. He'll talk about how snakes or fiery serpents are scared of myrrh. They want frankincense. Frankincense does represent living forever and all, is for healing. But they're scared of the myrrh. Okay, that's why it's so valuable, though. If you wanted to eliminate a supernatural being, you would need some, right? Okay, that's why it's so expensive back then. Okay. All right. And the frankincense is very important. God just relates this all to Jesus, though. Okay. If you want to read these very weird and long stories about frankincense and myrrh from Herodotus, you can pause it and read it if you want. It's very strange. It'll start talking about dragons and frankincense and myrrh, and it'll start talking about the phoenix. Okay, it's about death and resurrection. All right, obviously this relates to Jesus because that's why he drank myrrh, and then he rose from the dead. Okay, God uses everyone's myths. He really does. Of course, you're not supposed to go do this yourself. God will just link all this to just accepting the body and blood of Christ. Okay, that's what God always does. Because if you're doing some weird ceremony with literal frankincense and myrrh, it's going to be witchcraft. Okay. God just funnels the information. Instead of doing weird witchcraft, just believe in Jesus. Okay? Just believe in Jesus. You don't need to do some weird life-changing ceremonies with frankincense and myrrh. Okay? So, yeah. And of course, myrrh didn't actually kill him. That was kind of the point. It killed him, but he actually rose from the dead. Alright? Not even myrrh can kill God, of course. Alright? And, it's about trying to kill God with myrrh, but not even that could kill him, right? Even though it did for 3 days, technically. Okay. But God uses the whole myrrh thing. He totally does. Alright. But we're going to get into a little bit deeper. So what I've been studying is myrrh represents death. I think God uses play on words too. Myrrh kind of sounds like murder. Okay. And I know that's stupid. Murder. Yeah, it represents death. Okay. It represents death. Frankincense, on the other hand, represents life and living forever and eternal life. It's the exact opposite. And what God is trying to say, you're going to need the balance of both in your life and your walk to Jesus, okay? You're going to need both. You're going to need life and death teachings, all right? And yes, myrrh is very scary and dangerous. It represents murder, right? It represents dying. Okay, but even Jesus had to die and rise from the dead, okay? Even as Christians, we know one day we're going to die. We're going to want that myrrh, theoretically, right? One day we're going to die and rise and be in heaven, right, with Jesus. We need and God talks about how you actually in life and in your teachings you're going to need the balance of both. Okay, frankincense and myrrh oppose each other, but you need the balance of both in your walk through life, okay? Because some people are really scared of death, and they should be if they don't know Jesus. They're real afraid of death. And as Christians, we know there's a balance, right? No, I don't want to die, but I'm also not scared to die because I know I'm going to be with God one day. And I will get the frankincense, supposedly. Frankincense does represent living forever and eternal life, okay? But some people, they'll cheat. They'll want the life now, right? They'll try to steal the frankincense now, theoretically, okay? They'll cheat. They'll say, I want to live forever now in this world. I want to get all that good stuff now. And then when they die, they're going to get the bad stuff, okay, if they do that, okay? They'll cheat and rob and kill each other because they want to live forever on earth now, all right? And that's not what you're supposed to be doing. There's a balance of both. God talks about a balance between life and death, and he'll use the frankincense and myrrh to explain that, okay? That's what this Bible passage is about. It's about balancing out the weight. It'll talk about throughout the Bible, it'll bring up frankincense and myrrh and other anointing oils, and it'll constantly say it's a weight or a balance. You have to find the balance, and God is the only one that can give you that balance on life. After you die, for sure, but on earth as well, okay? You're gonna myrrh represents death and suffering, okay, and the poisons of this world, okay. And frankincense is the opposite, okay. And you can't skip the myrrh on earth, okay? You can't skip it and just have an easy life all the time, all right? Even Jesus had to suffer and die. He had to go through the myrrh to get to the everlasting life, right? That's the theology behind it. All right, absolutely. Okay, but what I wanted to do is I wanted to bring up some other and you know that there's all these weird myths, and it's not just with the Greeks and the Romans, it's the Arabian stuff, it's African stuff, but Herodotus really talks about all of it. Okay, he's a very famous. He was like the very famous historian. He brought up other cultures too. That's why he was the first very famous. He was the first one to do that. Usually people only talk about their own culture. He was Greek, but he talked about other people's cultures too. And Christians, we have to do the same thing if you really want to learn. Okay, all right. It talks about how everyone wanted gold, frankincense, and myrrh, or frankincense and myrrh. Okay, it has a lot to do with dying and resurrecting and living forever. And the reason why Jesus had to drink it is because God is saying he's giving it to you with the body and blood of Christ. Instead of going on some wild goose chase looking for frankincense and myrrh or doing some weird ceremony to live forever, you should just accept Jesus, because that's why Jesus had to drink it. It's already in his blood, right? Theoretically, the frankincense and myrrh is already in Jesus' blood. So that's why God just says you just have to accept the body and blood of Christ. Okay, because these guys were all paranoid about living forever and doing it the right way and being good, but they didn't understand how. This is how. That's why God uses, there's so much deep meaning behind when God says he gives us his body and blood. He uses all these myths, because that's why he already has that stuff in his blood. Alright, theoretically, okay? He already has myrrh and frankincense in his blood. And not to mention, and I'm gonna get all weird with it now, okay? So, don't you think it's weird that, you know, you can say that Jesus had supernatural powers? If there's anyone in the Bible that I'm definitely gonna say it was definitely him. He was healing people, right? He was healing people. Here's a very good, interesting question. He was healing people. How come when he was being, you know, whipped and cut and bleeding, how come he wasn't healing? How come he wasn't healing if he could heal people, if he had the power to heal? How come he was being able to be cut and killed? It's because of the Garden of Gethsemane. He drank that wine, okay? And then he had myrrh that's, if you want to use the theology behind it, this weird stuff. Him drinking that wine at the Garden of Gethsemane was the reason he was able to get hurt and die. And then he had to take another dose of it when he right before he died, so he could die. Because according to the Greeks and the Romans, this wine or this fruit is the only way you can kill a supernatural person or hurt them. And that God uses that with Jesus, bro. He totally uses that, okay? But God, of course, God overcame both of it. You can't kill God with literal murder, of course. But God uses the thinking behind it, of course. And you can get all weird with it. And I know what people are gonna say. Why are these people all freaking out about frankincense and myrrh? You can go and buy frankincense and myrrh now, and I'm sure if you drink it or whatever, you're not gonna live forever or have supernatural healings. That's true, okay? I'm gonna go, this is what I'm gonna do, okay? I'm gonna start from the beginning. So, Adam and Eve, they were, I don't know, somewhat immortal or something, right? They weren't normal at first, okay? And then things probably started fading off. I say fading off because even if you go to the earlier people of the Bible, they lived for a really long time. There was Methuselah. There was all these people, even in the Assyrian kings list. These guys were so old, supposedly. And if you take this literally, you could say that they were partially immortal, or they had a harder time dying than we do now. Okay, they couldn't die, or they were closer, more related to Adam and Eve. That's why they were able to live longer. Okay. And it's possible that kept going a little bit. There are possible bloodlines that people were just, they had a harder time dying. Okay. One of these people could have been Samson. Okay. If he was single-handedly fighting people, whole armies by himself, and supposedly being injured and being healed immediately, it's possible that he was more, he was more like a Methuselah person. You understand what I'm saying? He had a harder time dying than we do now. It's possible there's possible that certain bloodlines have that in them more than other people. Okay, a very high contender would be Moses, Samson. Okay, And I say that because Moses had that hand. He lost his hand and his hand grew back. Okay, that's still frankincense and myrrh theology. That's why there was a burning bush there. Okay, that myrrh is his hand dying, and the frankincense would be his hand coming back. Alright? Of course, it just came from God, though. Alright? But the bush represents the frankincense and myrrh. The burning bush, yeah. Moses, Samson, okay? But just because there's those bloodlines doesn't mean that they're all good. It's possible that Alexander the Great was one of these bloodlines. Okay? Because if you read into the myths about Alexander the Great, there's all this weird stuff about how he was, if you believe in it, he was healing very fast. He supposedly rose from the dead or survived death many times. If that's true, there's something weird going on here. Not just, oh, he just got really lucky. Maybe he did, but if you use these myths and use the biblical storyline, it's possible that Alexander the Great had a harder time dying, just like Samson, because he was more related to like Methuselah and stuff like that. Do you understand what I'm saying? Alright, if you want to get all supernatural about it. Because Alexander the Great got hit, he got bludgeoned to death, and he broke many of his bones, and according to his stories, he was healed like the next day. Okay, and that's very strange if it's real. Okay, it's possible that these guys were healing faster because they were more related to Adam and Eve. Do you understand what I'm saying? Okay, regardless if they were good or bad, they were just related to them more. All right, and so things started fading off. So what's up with the frankincense and myrrh? This is gonna get really weird, okay? Because I know nowadays you can just go buy frankincense and myrrh at the store or something, or at Amazon. It's probably somewhat expensive, but not too bad. Okay, it's possible that back in the day, these people were always constantly talking about frankincense and myrrh. It's possible that they had real frankincense and myrrh. Like, they had real elements from the Garden of Eden, not just the stuff we have now. Do you understand what I'm saying? They had real frankincense and myrrh from the Garden of Eden. Like, it was like 10 times more powerful than the frankincense and myrrh that we have on earth now. Do you understand what I'm saying? That's a possibility if you want to get really freaky and weird about it. Alright? But it doesn't matter. I think all that stuff is very interesting. I think it's amazing that God links all those myths to the Bible, but God just directs it to Jesus. Okay? You don't need to go find the Garden of Eden. You don't need to go look for Garden of Eden, frankincense, and myrrh. You can just accept the body and blood of Christ right now. You understand what God is doing? Okay? Because all these guys were looking for magic trees of life. They were constantly looking for magical powers, and God is trying just to say no. You don't need all that stuff. You don't even need to live forever on earth now. Why would you want that anyway? Alright? It's a deception. Why would you want to live forever on this earth? You would want some myrrh to pass on, right? You understand what I'm saying? And God, that's why God says he gives us his body and blood, because he is the frankincense and myrrh. Okay? That's what God is saying. Okay? Alright, obviously most Christians don't do weird ceremonies with frankincense and myrrh, because they already know that you just need the body and blood of Christ. Right? Alright? Yeah, so yeah. And I'm going to bring up something else. Obviously, you're not supposed to be doing this stuff. You should just accept Jesus, because this is what happened. You can get all freaky with this stuff. Some people say this is Nimrod. Okay. Maybe because he was more related to Adam and Eve, and his body just didn't decompose properly. Right? Or he's still alive. That's that freaky thing I've been talking about. It's possible that these guys were more related to Adam and Eve. They're old, so they had a harder time decomposing and dying. Okay. Not necessarily that they're good, though. Okay. It's also possible that someone did some weird ceremony with frankincense and myrrh. I'm talking about real frankincense and myrrh from the Garden of Eden, and that's why this body is still alive and not decomposing. Because if you look very closely, there are capsules and containers for frankincense and myrrh, probably, okay, that are mystically keeping this body asleep but not dead. Okay? Because if you balance out the frankincense and myrrh, you can probably do this if you use all those weird myths. That could be what's going on here. Some people think this is Noah because Noah has the same storyline about how he fell asleep. He took some weird wine and fell asleep, right? That's why some people think this is Noah. I'm not saying that that's true. I'm just giving you the theories behind it. Okay? Yeah. So real frankincense and myrrh could be in that tomb, and you can get all freaky with it now because now the government has it, and who knows what's going on with that. It's probably like some weird mark of the beast stuff. I know this is gonna sound like conspiracy theory stuff, but I don't know. Okay, you never know. All right, it's possible that the government has real frankincense and myrrh, and that's gonna be the mark of the beast. They're gonna offer you some eternal life baloney, right? And then you're gonna die and go to hell because you're not supposed to do that. You're just supposed to accept the myrrh now. Okay, you're not gonna have an easy life right now, but at least you can die and be God later. All right. You can get all weird with the frankincense and myrrh, like if it's real frankincense and myrrh from the Garden of Eden. All right, and it's very interesting because something like this happened with Alexander the Great's body. It was not decomposing correctly. And in the book of Daniel, some people make a reference to Alexander the Great as being a unicorn. He has one horn, and so does this guy. If you look on the bottom corner, he has a horn. And this horn represents what Alexander the Great was, and his body didn't decompose, right? There's that weird connection there that I'm noticing, okay? Because this guy has a weird horn on his helmet or crown, and it says Alexander the Great had the same horn in the book of Daniel, and there could be a reference to these guys doing. It's possible they did some weird deal with the devil. That's true, or they stole some frankincense and myrrh from the Garden of Eden, or they were part of some weird bloodline. I'm just theorizing here, okay? But it's so funny because guess how, according to the myths and the theories and the stories, guess how Alexander the Great did die? He drank some weird wine, some weird poisonous wine. Probably theoretically, mystically, it had myrrh in it. Okay, I'm using the myths. All right. Also, Daniel mentioning Alexander the Great being a little horn. That eternal fire horn could represent him being, more somewhat immortal, but not all the way, obviously. And he drank that wine. That's how he died. Just like Samson, just like Noah, just like Lot, right? Lot drank some wine, fell asleep. It could not be just regular wine. It could be the myrrh. Okay. And just like Adam and Eve, maybe. Okay? Also, I think it's also very strange that Alexander the Great was made a pharaoh in Egypt. And I know Egyptian historians and stuff, they think that's very strange. They just liked him. No, it's because they thought he had immortality to him. Alright? They thought something weird was going on with him, so they made him a pharaoh. Okay? Because maybe something was going on. I understand that maybe it's just they just liked him, and they thought maybe he just got really lucky and survived all these injuries, but I don't think so if you believe in supernatural stuff. Okay, all right. And so that's why they made him a pharaoh, is because they didn't think he was able to die. They thought he was divine. Okay, anyway, also I'm gonna go ahead and bring up some things from movies a little bit. Obviously, what myrrh reminds me of Superman and Kryptonite. It's like the only thing that can like slow him down and kill him. That's like the main one. Obviously, it's not called myrrh, but it's the same theory behind it. Also, it kind of reminds me in this X-Men movie, The Last Stand, I think it's called, where they have that shot and it makes them lose their power. Like at the end of the X-Men have to decide if they want to take it or not, or they have to fight against it. That would be theoretically myrrh, because it can just take away your powers too. All right. This weird shot in this movie reminds me of myrrh a lot. And even in the Avengers, they were killing each other with the stones of fire. That's how I see it, because they're supposed to be superhuman and they're not supposed to touch the stones of fire. Okay, the X-Men and the Avengers should have just read the Bible. They should know not to touch it without God's permission, which they didn't have. Okay, anyway. And Snow White does look like she has some weird flowers around her. Could be frankincense and myrrh theology there, because the frankincense keeps her alive, but the myrrh keeps her asleep. You know what I mean? And yeah, and probably a really good one to be one if you've ever seen Game of Thrones, where Jon Snow is brought back to life. There's that fire on the side, those burning coals. That's technically frankincense. Okay. Theoretically, I'm using the theory behind it. I have no idea if they say that in the show. Probably not. But it's in that fire represents the eternal flame, which is what's on this guy's head. That's the eternal flame. That's a fire. Okay. And I wasn't gonna do this, but I'm gonna go and do it, even though people are gonna just be like, "You're stupid." I don't care. I know everyone thinks there's no connection between frankincense and Frankenstein. I disagree. Okay, because that's what frankincense was used for. It was theoretically, mystically used to try to bring people back from the dead and preserve them. And that's what happens with Frankenstein. He comes back from the dead, right? So, not a coincidence at all, actually. Yeah, I don't think so. That's what frankincense is supposed to be used for. It's supposedly to keep you alive longer. Or bring you back from the dead. Alright? Of course, I'm gonna say, this is why God just says he gives us his body and blood, because it's all in Jesus' blood. You don't have to worry about it. And I will go ahead and add in the gold, because usually it's gold, frankincense, and myrrh. The gold it represents a lot of things, but the gold represents the wisdom to control it. Okay? That's why in the Bible, the frankincense and myrrh was inside the gold Ark of the Covenant. It represents the wisdom to know when to use it. Okay? Alright? And it's supposed to contain both of them. Alright? God is supposed to have the power over life and death. Alright? Over the gold, frankincense and myrrh. And the gold is the wisdom to know when to use it. Alright? You understand what I'm saying? And sometimes he'll give that to his followers. Alright, sometimes God does allow murder. Sometimes, alright? And no, even frankincense can be bad. You don't want to live forever on earth. You don't want to make some deal with the devil to live for a long, long time on earth. It's terrible. That's a trick, right? Alright? Anyway. So please think about this stuff, guys. And thank you.